I'm excited to be here. It's good to see everyone. I hope the room isn't just full of Arctic Wolf people, but even if it is, that's cool. Or my CISO colleagues who are just here to heckle me because they're already CISOs. And they're just here to fact check my presentation. So welcome everyone. My name is Adam Marre. I am the Chief Information Security Officer of Arctic Wolf. And today we're here to talk about becoming a CISO. Are you sure you want to be a CISO? Some people said I could probably call this presentation "So You Don't Want to Be a CISO." And we'll get into the reasons why. But a little bit about me to start off with. I started off my career as a video game developer. I worked for a studio called Avalanche Software up in Salt Lake City, making mostly kids games. It was part of Disney Interactive. So I worked for Disney. That studio actually still exists. Now it's owned by Warner Brothers, and they just came out with a game last year called Hogwarts Legacy. Some of you may have heard of it. I know a lot of people out there. It's great. So some of you might be thinking, why in the world would you give up a job in video games to do this nonsense, right? Well, the short answer is 9/11. That happened, had a big effect on me. So I ended up joining the United States Army, became a counterintelligence agent, and then found my way into the FBI. And that is where I got my cybersecurity background. That's where I got most of my training in cybersecurity. It's where I learned, I was a forensic collector. I was an online undercover, participated in a lot of investigations, both national security and criminal. So kind of did everything across the gamut. I was also on the SWAT team for about a little over 10 years of that time as a side duty. Did eventually become a SWAT team leader, so I was a door kicker a little bit too. Stepped down in 2018 to join Qualtrics. Some of my former Qualtrics colleagues may be in the room as well. Eventually, helped build that team there, became the head of security operations, and then a couple years ago, I took the job to be Chief Information Security Officer at Arctic Wolf. So that's a little bit about my path. Through this journey, I have met many people in this role or in a role that has a different title, but the same function. Chief Security Officer, Director of Security, Director of Security Operations, Director of Information Security, whatever it is. They're very similar. I'm going to talk about those roles today. And our goals are going to be these. One, I'm going to talk about what the role of CISO is and what it isn't. Explore what it takes to be a CISO. Talk about why in the world you would ever want to do this. So we're definitely going to talk about some of the difficulties, drawbacks, things like that. And then some of my thoughts on how to succeed in being a security leader. Now, I need to add a couple caveats to this. First of all, let me just tell you, the reason I decided to give this topic as a topic here is I do belong to the same, if some of you were in Brent's talk just a minute, just before this one, I also belong to an organization called SLCISO, or Salt Lake CISO Forum. It is a group of mainly chief information security officers from the Mountain West, but also other security leaders. And we get together, we have regular meetings, we get to commiserate with each other. It can be a lonely place to be a CISO. So we get together, we have Chatham House rules, we get to share things with each other, talk about, different vendors that we use, all those kinds of things. That group also likes to give back to the community. We have a scholarship program where we give scholarships to the universities around here to their cybersecurity programs. We have some other outreach that we do, and one of those things is here at SAINTCON, we have a booth down in the village, downstairs, the leadership community, and we sponsored and facilitated some of these leadership-focused talks here at SAINTCON, and we hope to do more next year. And the reason I focused on this one was when we were talking as a community about what presentations we could give, I was thinking about the thing I get asked the most by just random people out there, people getting started in cybersecurity, people who know me from a friend of a friend, my kids' friends, people I know in the community who say, hey, I know the security guy, you can talk to this guy. I talk to a lot of people. Why do I make time for those people when I'm really busy? It's because when I was back looking at getting a job in the FBI, when I was back even before that, looking at getting a job in video games, I wanted people to reach out to talk to mentor me, to help me understand what was the path, how do you get there, what's required. And guess what I had a really hard time doing? finding any human beings willing to talk to me. So I try to make time for people. I try to make time for these people in college and other places who reach out to me and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about your job, because I think it's really important for us to nurture that next generation. So my thoughts today that I'm going to share with you are what I share in these meetings that I have with these various young people and people even more experienced in their career, to try to guide them and really focus the conversation on, are they sure they want to do this? Because I'm not sure they understand what this really means. And are there other options? So that's a little bit of the why I'm talking to you today. But I did want to throw this out. Brent put it at the end of his presentation, but I'll put it at the beginning of mine. Our leadership community that I just mentioned, we have a virtual escape room, and it's not for nothing. We got some legit prizes, $300, $200, $100 that we're giving away to people who participate and are able to escape our virtual online escape room. And we have a Nintendo Switch down there that we are going to give away. And you can just go play with one of us at the booth too. Just play some Smash or some Kart, anything you want. And then there's a code there at the bottom. So, and if you're afraid of QR codes, there is the URL below that you can type in if you're paranoid, which many of you are wearing tinfoil hats. So I think you're paranoid. So anyway, that's our escape room for the SL CISO community. But let's jump in. Let's start with a brief history of the CISO role. Many of you may not know this, but every company or organization has officer roles, and these officer roles are built into the bylaws of the company. When you set up a company, you have to say, this is how we run the company. And in those bylaws, you set up officers, and these officers have an actual obligation, a fiduciary responsibility to that organization, basically saying they will do their best, ethically, morally, everything, all their talents they will bring to bear to make the organization successful in achieving its mission. And in fact, there are legal requirements to this, especially for the finances of the organization. They can't waste money. There can't be too much waste. There's a bunch of rules and regulations that come into play when it comes to what an officer of an organization is. We know the names of these. They're CEO, Chief Executive Officer, CFO, Chief Financial Officer, COO, Chief Operations Officer, and many others. Well, in the mid-90s, cybercrime started to increase. Why? Well, because the internet was starting to come alive. Some of us who are a little more gray-haired remember this time when it was the brave new world, when the thing that we had been playing in forever, other people started to notice, and people started to get this weird thing called an email address, right? Anyway, so in the mid-90s, crime started to increase as people got more and more online, especially Russian cybercrime, other nation state-sponsored crimes. And as it so happens, there was a big company called Citigroup, Citibank, that got hacked. And they had a really big problem on their hands. Before they announced their hack, so no one knew about it, they decided they wanted to create a new role. They wanted to create a Chief Information Security Officer. In other words, they wanted to take a tactical role. People have been doing security and information systems for a long time, but they were the first ones to say, let's elevate that role to a chief level status, to that same officer level status. And they came up with this idea of the CISO. They hired a guy named Stephen Katz to be the CISO. And he was the first one in 1994, 1995 timeframe is when this happened. Now you have to understand that he came in, and what we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but what commonly happens to CISOs, he comes in and then finds out, hey, guess what? We've been breached. And the reason we hired you is so that you can help elevate, escalate, mature our information security program, and we want you to do damage control, basically. So not 30 days after he gets hired, the city announces their breach, and 5 minutes passes, and Stephen Katz gets a call, and someone says, your reputation is ruined. Your career is over. Why did you take this job? This is terrible. Because what was happening is he was getting blamed, even though he wasn't there when the breach happened. And that's going to be a theme throughout today, so get used to that one. But what did Stephen then do is he had to go around to the company, the various offices of the company around the world, and start talking to investors, other groups, externally, the media, journalists, everyone he could, to start talking about how they were improving the security program. There was this new role called the CISO, and he was going to fix it and make everything good. That is how the CISO role came to be. And now other companies slowly have looked at this and decided they need them. But it's not a universal role. So even though it's 30 years old, it's not something that every company has or even thinks they need to have, which is surprising to me. The other thing is, I told you about officers written in bylaws. Often the CISO role is not written into those bylaws, and that will become important a little bit later. In other words, it's not a true officer role. It has the title, has the name, but not some of the authority and responsibility that's set up with that. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's a little history so you know where it came from. And by the way, in corporate governance, 30 years is nothing. That's still brand new. It's a very, very new role. And I know with all the tech companies, there's all these new see everything like the chief dragon slayer, the chief unicorn, or whatever it is. But this is a real role. And that's the difference is you can call them whatever they want, but if they're written in the bylaws, it is an officer of the organization. Okay. So what is the core mission of the CISO? What is their real job? What do they do? What are they supposed to be focused on? Well, I got this from Rick Howard, who wrote a great book on going back to first principles when it comes to cybersecurity. And this is what he reduces it to, and I really like it too. The mission of a CISO, the mission of the security program at an organization is to reduce the probability of material impact from a cyber event. That's the objective, to reduce it. We'd love to end it. We'd love to get rid of it completely, but we all know that's probably not possible. So we reduce it to the level of the risk appetite of the organization. And that bullet point is the biggest thing on this slide. Because we all know we're trying to reduce risk, right? We're trying to reduce the material impact. That's what we are trying to do. But we only do it to the level of risk appetite of the organization. What do I mean by that? In the previous talk to this one, Brent talked about businesses exist to do business, to make money, to create value for their shareholders. Organizations exist to fulfill their mission. If you're a school district, you want to teach kids. If you're a nonprofit organization, you want to fight poverty. That is the mission of the organizations. They don't exist to be secure as much as we as practitioners who love security and love to see that things be secure would like to completely secure the organizations. That is not why they exist. If they did, what would we do? We turn out the lights, we lock the doors, unplug everything, wrap it in concrete, drop it in the ocean. Now it's perfectly secure, right? No one can get to it. But that's not why it exists. It exists to do business. So your job as a CISO is to figure out what that risk appetite is of the organization. There's strategies to do that. In other words, how much risk can that organization bear? How much should it bear in order to be able to do its job safely? And then you reduce risk to that level and no more. That is your job as a CISO. And people out there, if you want to at me on this, great. Let's talk about it toward the end of this, or you can come up to me and beat me up after this talk. But that is what your mission is. The reason this is important is I have to underscore this, and I cannot emphasize this enough to a room full of amazing security practitioners, is that the CISO role is a business role. Yes, your primary job is to secure the organization, but it is a business role or an organizational role. In other words, you are there to make sure that the organization is successful, that the business makes money, that the organization teaches kids, that it helps solve poverty. That's your mission. Your mission isn't to make it as secure as possible. And I think sometimes we misunderstand that because we get so excited about the security things that sometimes we lose that objective. And you know what? We need practitioners there who their only prerogative is to push security as much as they can and bring up the security things and bring up the vulnerabilities and say, oh no, we're facing this risk. We need people to do that. So you don't have to ever make this transition into the business side. In fact, more and more companies have high-level technical security roles that you can fulfill. They can be leadership roles too that you can fulfill and go into, and you never have to cross this Rubicon into the business world. I've met some of them from Amazon, from Google, from Meta, these graybeards, I've been doing it for a long time, 30 years. And they're like a principal or chief architect or whatever it is, and all they care about security and making the thing secure, and they don't have to cross this side so much. But if you are thinking about becoming a CISO, you must understand that at some point you're going to have to cross that Rubicon. You have to cross that line into the business side and realize that you are a business leader. All right, so what are your objectives? So I put an image on the other side. I know you can't read it. It's not intentional. You're not supposed to be able to do that, but it's the CISO mind map. Look that up if you don't know it. It's awesome. It's a great map of all the different domains and subdomains of cybersecurity. Does it give you a headache? Yeah, it gives me a headache. This is all the things we're supposed to take care of in a security program. So you're supposed to align your security strategies with those business goals. You turn your security objectives into risks or talk about them in the language of risk and present those risks and then work to mitigate them. All of this is to protect your organizational assets and data and access to that data, the CIA triad, ensuring business continuity, and then one of my favorites, creating that culture of security across the organization. Now, these are not all the objectives. I just wanted to sum up some of the main ones of what you're trying to do as you're trying to reduce that probability of material impact. These are some of the main objectives that you're trying to do across all of those domains of security. So it's no longer just caring about your favorite things in security or what your job is in your lane. You've got to now have that overarching view of everything. So how do we do that? Number one, I talked about this a lot just a minute ago, business strategy. If you're going to cross this line and become a security leader, lift your head up over all of the security domains and look at the whole business. That's what you need to do. You need to understand the business goals. You need to understand how the organization you work for does its job. If it's a business, how do they make money? If you work for Facebook under Meta, you need to understand that they are not in the business of delighting their customers and presenting them with cat videos and grandma's whatever, crazy rantings. That's not their business. What is their business? Selling your attention to advertisers. That's their business. So they collect as much information on you as possible, sell it to all the data brokers in the world, collect information together, and then sell that access to advertisers. That's how they make their money. So if you're in security at Meta, then you are protecting that enterprise. If you work for another organization, you better know how they make money. And that's not just what I just said conceptually, that's the start. Then you need to know everything down the chain of budget. Where does the money come from? Is it subscription? Is it advertising? How is the advertising money obtained? What do the budgets look like? What did you spend on COGS? What did you spend on G&A, legal, like all these different expenditures across the budget? You need to understand all of that because you need to understand how the company does its business. And then you need to be able to communicate in business terms. And I don't just mean, because I think sometimes this is misunderstood, I don't just mean you learn how to talk business and then you can get the cool security stuff done. That's not what I mean. I mean, you literally understand the business, talk business because you want the business to succeed. And part of your job to make that business succeed, your main job is to secure the business, not the other way around. So you truly have to understand that. And for some of us who came up through security, or in my case, law enforcement in the military, you have some work to do to understand how businesses operate. Now, some of you may have MBAs or decide to go to an MBA, get an MBA program and get a degree. That's great. You don't have to do that. But however you have to do it, you have to understand business or your organization, if it's a government organization or something else, to the level that you can then secure it and be able to talk to the other leaders in a way with authority, knowing that you can walk in there and have a budget discussion and not have people talk about EBITDA and other things you don't understand because you want to be in there and you want to be at the same level they are. So you may have a lot of work to do on the business side. Some of us in security do. Risk management. Give a whole talk on that. But basically, to sum it up, you have to come up with a common language to discuss risks with the other people in the organization. It's not fair to expect them to understand all the ins and outs of security like we do and then just be able to shorthand it. It also undermines your credibility if everything you say is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Then you're the security leader who cried wolf. If you come in there and everything's a critical or everything's a high, well, guess what? Like Syndrome taught us in The Incredibles, nothing's a high, right? Everything's a high, nothing's a high. You have to be able to be the one who says, these are the most important things in this order. And this is what we need to do, and this is why, and have a common language to do that. Then, of course, as a security leader, you must stay up on the threat landscape to understand what the threats are coming, how they're changing all the time. You must know that. And then, of course, regulatory compliance is changing too. Now, this is one of the other key factors as a business leader that you must do. What are the certifications that our company needs to be able to sell to the customers that we want to sell to or do business with the government or whatever it is? And you have to stay up on that. It's constantly changing. What CMMC just published Their new rules last week. PCI is changing next year. FedRAMP, who knows what's going on with them? They're always doing new things. So you've got to stay up on regulatory compliance. Okay. What is a CISO not? A CISO is not, or the highest level security leader is not just a technical expert. Although they should be, that's not the only thing they are. They are not solely responsible for all the security failures in the organization. Yes, the buck stops with the CISO, ultimately. If there's a security problem, ultimately, you've got to hold that responsibility, and you do. But that doesn't mean you're the only one that screws up in the organization. So it needs to be a shared responsibility. And then this last one is something that's really, really hard. It's really hard because it's not really something that we can control, because it's something that the world understands or the greater community understands. Having a reasonable standard of security is something that we do not have in the cyberspace. Think about in the physical world. If you have a business, they set up a business, they put locks on the doors, get an alarm, maybe some cameras, maybe a vault if they're a bank. That's a reasonable amount of security. Now, if they get broken into and a bunch of stuff stolen, everybody isn't blaming that company. Oh my gosh, they're so stupid. How come they didn't have these better locks on the doors? And it's because we have a general understanding of what they should do to secure their business in the physical world. We do not have an analogous standard. And I mean, one stated or one sort of generally understood as common sense. We do not have that. So what happens when a company gets hacked? What do? We blame the victim. I mean, we also blame the attackers, right? Don't get me wrong. They don't get off free, but we blame the victim. Oh, this stupid company. Oh, they didn't have MFA everywhere. Oh, there was some random Citrix server they should have known about that didn't have MFA. How stupid are they, right? That's what we do. We blame the victim because there is no understood reasonable standard of security. There's lots of security standards and frameworks out there. But if you ask the average person what a company needs to do to secure their business where you wouldn't blame them, they have no idea what you're talking about. It's a problem. I don't have a solution for it, so don't misunderstand me there. I'm just pointing out that it's a problem. And what it does is it makes it so that anything wrong that happens is whose fault, ultimately, at the organization? The CISO's fault. I'm not saying it should be. I hope we change, but it is. I guess what I am saying is it shouldn't be, but it is. So we need to clarify those responsibilities. Security should be a shared responsibility, certainly a shared responsibility with all the C-level executives, but really more people than that in an organization. The CISO should be seen as a strategic leader, not just the security person. And they're not a one-stop shop for all the security issues. That's not how this works. All right. You should also understand, if this is something you're thinking about doing, that there are different types of CISOs out in the world. It's a common title used, much like CEO. The CEO of Disney or of Walmart is very different than the CEO of a startup. What they do every day is very different. Even though it's the same job, very different. Similar with CISOs. If you are the CISO of Walmart, a Fortune 1 or a Fortune 100 company that's large, 100,000 employees, likely your job is going to be very different than if you're the CISO of a startup trying to go public. They're very different jobs because what you do is going to be very different. So to illustrate that, this isn't mine. A number of other people, I kind of cobbled these together from a couple different lists of these different types of CISOs that exist out there. Transformational, that's usually like your late stage startup. They're looking to go public, and this is where they want to take a very basic security program and mature it. Or they may have a pretty mature program, but they want to make it even better. And your job is to come in and change things to make it better. Then you have your post-breach. First CISO ever was a post-breach CISO. He came in after breach, trying to do a couple things. One, mature the program, like a transformational CISO, but then also trying to do damage control and trying to repair that to the outer world. Tactical and operational, especially with smaller teams, you might have a tactical CISO who's actually got hands on keyboard, is actually doing security things. This is not very common, but it does happen. Or someone that's really focused on those day-to-day operations. Compliance and risk, I've seen this a lot. Organizations might have like a director of security, but then all of a sudden now they want to get FedRAMP and they realize, oh my gosh, all this, we need a CISO, and they'll bring in a CISO to try to get those compliance or make them better. Steady state. You might have a very mature program with a very large security team, and they just need someone to come in and keep things running. This might seem easy. Oh, that's easy. Just keep doing what you're doing. No, this can be actually sometimes the hardest to not let teams get complacent, to make sure you're finding the efficiencies where you need to. And then finally, your customer-facing evangelist. Now, all CISOs might do part of these, but there's some that are focused on each one of these. And so there might be some where their main job is to be out there talking to customers, presenting at different conferences, all of those kinds of things. When Qualtrics was bought by SAP, and we worked with them for a while, I became friends with Tim McKnight, their CSO at the time. Oh, those were mics. Their CSO at the time, and this is what he did with most of his time. He was a customer-facing evangelist. He just went and talked to people. That was his main job. So there are different types of CISOs, and you can focus on one of these areas. In fact, I hear my CISO colleagues talk a lot about this, where they're like, oh, I want to do this because I like to be in the startup space, or I like to run large teams, or whatever it is. So this is something you should keep in mind. Not all these jobs are the same. All right. So now let's get to the point where we talk about why you might not want to do this job. We know that burnout is a big problem in cybersecurity. And one of the reasons I think burnout is a big problem is because I bet each and every person in this room has a high sense of duty. You get into this job and do it because, yes, you love security, and also you want to do a really good job and make sure all the things are secure, to do your job to the utmost. And that is an incredible personality trait. It also makes you highly susceptible to being overworked, working too much, doing things when not asked on the weekend, and burning yourself out. It is a problem, and that's a whole other talk I'm not going to get into. But that high sense of duty means that we carry a lot of the security burden on our backs. And now imagine if it's not just the domain that you're in, it's not just security operations or AppSec or pen testing. Imagine if it's every single security domain that I had on that CISO mind map on your back all the time. That is what a CISO is. You take all of that burden on yourself, and you have to make sure that all the right things are happening. This is why you might have a CISO get up and do a security awareness briefing and be really intense about it. I'm that guy. Because this is on you all the time. And now imagine you don't just have pressure from your manager or pressure from your teammates. You have both of that and pressure from the other C-level executives. Pressure from the board, where someone on the board can call you up randomly and say, are we secure? Or they read a random article about some esoteric CVE, and now you've got to answer this board member's questions on that about your organization all the time. So balancing all of those pressures. And not only that, but you can guarantee that if you're breached, it's your fault, right? And not only that, but you can be held personally liable. You can be sued by the shareholders and by others personally, not just as the organization. As I mentioned earlier, that a lot of CISOs aren't technically officers in the bylaws. Well, guess what that means? That means the D&O insurance doesn't apply to you. Directors and officers insurance, which covers you in the case if in the conduct of your duties, you get sued because of what you do at the company. That means there's an insurance that the company pays for that they will cover your legal costs. Well, a lot of CISOs don't have that because they're not an official officer. So now you're covering that yourself, even though you're getting sued for what you did in the company. And not only that, but the federal government may come after you. If the breach is bad enough, and your name is Tim Brown, you worked at SolarWinds, the federal government's going to come after you. Now, luckily, in that case, most of the charges have been dropped. But what is the SEC doing right now? They're poring over emails and other messages and sales collateral to find anything they can to see if that Tim Brown himself approved any of this and made a misstatement about their security. And by misstatement about their security, I mean, and in this case, if they had some random admin account that didn't have the proper password complexity on it, and yet in some statement he said, yes, we enforce password complexity everywhere, he's now liable for that. And that's what the federal government's trying to do to him in the SEC. So there's some pressure, just a little bit. All right. But why would you want to do this? Some other reasons. The CISO is still the new person in the room, still doesn't quite have that same level of authority. Many CISOs don't even report to the CEO. They report to somebody else in the C-suite. The CISO role, now, it's compensated well, but not as well as the other roles. If you were just looking at a list of compensation for C-level roles and you wanted to pick one, this probably wouldn't be the one you pick. And I kind of covered that on the other side. It's like, IT, the classic. If things work well, nobody says anything, right? So you don't get thanks. Now, I should say, I believe every day you don't have a breach is a victory and should be celebrated. So I hope you go celebrate every night when you don't have a breach. But no one says anything. They don't care. Everything's working, right? But if things go bad, like if one of your security tools messes up, slows people down, boots them from a Zoom call, heaven forbid, takes 30 extra seconds to log in, guess what? Everybody complains to you. Oh my gosh, the security team, there's 30 agents on our machine. They run so slow. You guys are the worst, right? Everybody complains. And if you get breached, it's your fault. If you get breached really bad, federal government comes after you. So that is the burden. But why would you want to do it? Some good reasons. Well, you do get to have significant strategic impact on your organization. And after you've been working at it for a while, you can look back at that organization and you can really see the fruits of your work. The organization is more secure. They are doing things better. You are enforcing MFA. You have made it more secure for people. And for us in security, that is so much. It is so much to be able to see the fruits of your labor. You also get to protect, elevate, and empower your people. If you're one of the people in the trenches and you're like, this sucks and we're all overworked and I hate it, guess what? When you're in charge, you can make sure that doesn't happen. You can protect your people, sometimes even protecting them from themselves and telling them not to work on the weekend and things like that. But protect your people, get them the resources they need to elevate their own careers and help empower them. I find that very rewarding. I try to do it to my utmost. And then you also get to create a clear understanding of risk in your organization and make the other leaders actually feel better because they don't just get a thumbs up when they say, are we secure? Or sky is falling more likely about everything. If you really educate them through risk, they can have confidence in their understanding of the risk the organization faces. And if you ever do get breached, they'll know, hey, we talked about this, we accepted the risk, we knew the risks, and that is an incredible thing that you can do. So this is a very rewarding career. You can also educate the broader world about security. I talked about that general lack of security knowledge. Well, guess what? You can work to fix that. You can write articles and have thought leadership pieces. And you can do all of this without the role of the CISO, but it does help. So there are some big rewards to doing this if you're willing to accept that burden and understand that it's a business role. Okay, so what can you do to prepare to be a CISO if this is what you're interested in? Well, and this is what I tell especially the young people who come to me, you have to develop the technical expertise. I think you, in at least one major cybersecurity domain, you need to be an expert. If that's security operations, application security, pen testing, whatever it is, you need to be the absolute expert in at least one of those. It's better if it's more than one, but at least one of those you need to be. And by expert, I mean you need to know in and out, history, forward, future, everything that's going on. Be an expert in one of those areas. That's my personal opinion. In fact, I can tell you this whole presentation is my personal opinion. So if you don't like it, you don't need to listen to me, but I really think you need to do that. Then once you've established that expertise in one or two major domains, then learn everything you can about all of the other domains across the whole CISO mind map. So develop that technical expertise. But security is just one thing. Leadership and management is a whole other skill set that their entire universities and colleges devoted to. Now, we've all seen that leader who is a great technical person and then they get promoted to a leader and they're a terrible leader, right? And they may be an awesome person, but they just don't know how to lead. And part of that's because they haven't received the training. They don't know. They don't know what they don't know, and they haven't worked at it. Leadership is its own domain, and there's so much to learn there. So you need to start learning that. Start teaching yourself. And again, you don't necessarily need to go to a program, but learn about it. We'll talk about that in a minute. Communication. I would say, bar none, after security expertise, the most important thing you need to learn as a leader is how to communicate and how to communicate well. And I have a whole slide on that in a minute. Gain experience. As you become better at your day job, at your main job, Look for those opportunities to reach cross-functionally, to go to other teams, even teams outside of security, and learn how a business functions from the ground up. Say yes to opportunities. Find them, seek them out. This will teach you more than just about anything else outside of security, is just reach out and gain that experience across as many things as you can. You might think it's super boring to review tax stuff with the finance team, but jump in, roll up your sleeves, help them out. Continuous learning, find ways to teach yourself. Obviously, you want to go after more certifications and things like that as you become more well-versed in security, but make sure that you're doing that even now. I know all of us in the CISO community, we haven't stopped. We keep teaching ourselves forever. And then professional development. Networking is still one of the best ways to get a job. So get out there and meet as many people as you can. This event is really good. Keep ties with all of these people, but there's also other kinds of events to go out to. And then find a mentor. If you really want to be a CISO, find a mentor who is a CISO or who has been one. Get regular time with them, and that's a person you can ask a lot of questions to. So here are some things to do to prepare to be a CISO. But I want to do a deep dive into 3 of those things I just talked about. One is communication. This is your main tool as a CISO, is communication. And you other CISOs can at me if you think I'm wrong, but I'm telling you, communication is the number one thing. Now, you need to have the data behind you. You need to have the thought. You need to have the risk program. You need to have all these things set up. But at the end of the day, you are a storyteller. And you have to be able to communicate this information. And it's not just that you can communicate clearly, because many people can do that. It's really having a fundamental understanding of your audience and then tailoring your message to that audience. When you're talking to C-level executives, you should, 1, understand generally how executives want to be spoken to, and then 2, how your specific executives want to be spoken to. I have seen so many briefings that are beautiful with charts and graphs and so much data and work went into it. And it just starts to fail, and you can see it after just a couple of minutes, maybe even 30 seconds. All the C-suite, their phones come up and they start doing this, right? And they're not paying attention anymore. And yeah, they should pay attention, but you know what? The communicator should understand, what have I done wrong here? Oftentimes with executives, by the way, they just want the bottom line up front. And it's not because they don't have time, not because they're lazy or anything like that, but it's because they're efficient. And they want to know, first of all, what the question is, and then they want to know what's the data I need to get from you to make the decision that you're asking me to make. So oftentimes you want to flip-flop it. A lot of us want to have all the data first and then come to our brilliant conclusion at the end, and that's not the way it works. You do the question first and then build on after that. Anyway, whole other talk on that. But you need to know that and know how to communicate that. But that's different than the way you communicate to board members. And it's different certainly than the way you communicate to employees. Each one of these audiences, these messages need to be tailored to them. But the one type of communication that spans all of these is storytelling. It's important to be a good storyteller so that people can really understand what you're trying to communicate. And that the data that you've painstakingly collected can be communicated to them and they can understand, why is this important to me and what do I need to do? And I like to add this last part of communication is to be transparent. We tend to overprotect data in security. Oftentimes things that we don't want to talk about, we can talk about. We can trust people. And we should have open communication channels so people can come to us and provide feedback. Transparency is very important. And if you can open up that transparency in interpersonal communication, I call this vulnerability. If you can open up that, it brings people in, draws people closer to you, and you can have a better relationship if they see it as being a two-way relationship. So when I talk to young people and I tell people, prepare to be a CISO, I say, start working on this right now. Start working on it today. And it's a lifelong quest to get better and better at communication. Second one, leadership. I talked about leadership as its own domain. Some of you who have been in the military, that's some of the best leadership training you will get in the world, whether you're an officer or non-commissioned officer. Incredible leadership training. You're lucky, but many people do not have that. So what do? Well, you've got to build up these skills, and you build up these skills by teaching yourself. There's tons of great books out there. And now we have YouTube and endless amounts of videos and other things that you can watch to try to up-level your leadership skills. The one I focus on the most is the one at the end there, listening and empathy. There's a great book by Russ Laraway called When They Win, You Win. And it's all about, first of all, making your leadership journey data-driven, and it's about collecting feedback about those you lead. So you ask them how you're doing as a leader. But there's so many good things to read about being a leader. It's beyond the scope of this. But the couple that I want to focus on besides listening and empathy is strategy and vision. I also see a lot of leaders fail on this. They don't know where they want to go, and they can't clearly articulate it. They can't point the direction and say, that's where we're going, that's what our mission is. They don't even have like commander's intent, which is a military thing, but they don't even have that. They're going to say, like, this is what our objective is. They need better strategy. They have lots of plans, but not a strategy, not a vision. And then hiring and developing people. Hiring is its own skill. And if you can do this well, you will have an amazing team that will help you. And then risk. I drive a risk-driven security program. I tell everybody out this at Arctic Wolf that it's a risk-driven program. Why do I do this? Because, as I alluded to earlier, if you can put the security problems in a language that the business understands, then the business can make good business decisions based on those risks, and you'll get good security. If you can't do this, then they're just going to be flailing and either trusting you or not trusting you, or it's just going to be a mess. And I've seen that happen. So understand what the priorities of the business are. Take your risks. And again, this is beyond the scope of this, but basically take your problems, turn them into risks. Make sure that you develop a process, that you use data in that process. Don't get lost in the weeds. You can have a really heavy risk process. You don't want that. Whatever's appropriate for your organization. And then educate your leaders in that. So when you say this is a medium risk, they know what that means. And yes, people have said the heat map of risk, high, medium, low at the scoring. There is some research to show that using that may be worse than not using it. But there are easy ways to take that to quantify what a medium risk means. Explain how you got to that risk level. And if you continue to educate them, your leaders, they will understand what that means. So then when you come in and you say this is a medium risk, then they understand what it actually means, and it's not just words. It actually means something. But there's a great book. Brent, what's the name of that book? It's How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity, right? By Douglas Hubbard. Great book. He has another book on risk that's really good. If you want to read all about it, it's really good. But the idea is you train your leaders in a common language. Typically, you translate the risk into dollars because everybody understands dollars. And then you use that to talk about risks and to stack rank them and make decisions on them instead of just coming in with fear, uncertainty, and doubt. All right. So that's it. Simple, right? Easy. And once you're a CISO, it's all easy street, right? You're just sitting up there, smoking cigars, golfing, no more worries. That's all what everybody below you does, and you just have a great time, right? Yeah, sounds good, right? Let's all be CISOs. I hope you found something out of this talk that will help you. I hope it is food for thought. If you really want to do this, there are other places to go in security, so the CISO isn't the only role. And I find when I talk to younger folks, that's usually the thing that opens up their mind, is they realize that this is not the only place to go. I can do other things. I can be a principal architect. I can do fun, hands-on keyboard security my whole career, and I don't have to do this. This is only the pinnacle if you like business. So I will say this, if you are interested in business and you think that's very interesting and running a whole organization and strategy, we need you. We need you to work on this. We need you to develop these skills. We need you because we need good security folks to become security leaders at the highest level and help us all improve the security across all organizations. That's my time. Thank you very much, everybody. But I do. Good. Somehow, I do have a few extra minutes, so I will take questions. Yes.
How do you personally keep up on?
How do I personally keep up on growing? I get to cheat because I'm an incredible threat intelligence team at Arctic Wolf that puts together briefings, talks about this. We have a channel in Slack that has briefings and then has articles that they post all the time. So I cheat that way. I also have an amazing security operations team that posts a lot of these. Then we have another channel in our Slack at work where people just post. I work at a security company. It's easy. But in general, I do have feeds that I pipe into, different aggregators, and I read those feeds very frequently to look at that. I did used to do a little bit of social media because a lot of things would break there. I don't like social media. I don't do it. I'm only on LinkedIn and only because I have to be. So I don't use social media for that. I typically use contacting others, but that's personally how I do it. And I do like to do the deep dives into the places I know that do deep dives into vulnerabilities. So I'm actually reading those and not just like the New York Times version. There's nothing bad about that, but they're not writing to me. Like I want to know the details, right? And then go to CVEs. But that's how I do it. Yeah. I get that question a lot. Is should I get a master's degree or not? Do I want to focus on certifications? My answer to that is yes, because typically all of that is good. I don't know if one is better than the other, and neither are absolutely needed. Although a lot of job postings for CISOs will have CISSP on there, for example, or maybe CISM, or like at least one of those. But I don't necessarily think any of that is a waste of time. But I would be really careful about what master's program you go into and make sure you're interested in it intrinsically for itself and not just to get the certificate. So if you think you're going to learn good things, go do it. It's great. And if you think it's worth the money, go do it. It's great. But typically those aren't necessary today to do that. If you're really passionate about security though, what I do suggest people is maybe you want to go get a business degree or even an MBA, because that's the stuff you don't want to do. And if you go force yourself to do it and pay for it, then you can get all that business knowledge, and the security stuff you're going to study, you're on your own. So that's also, depending on the person, one thing I talk about. And then certification's kind of a necessary evil. Well, maybe not evil is a strong word. A necessary annoyance. I don't know. They can be good though. They can teach you a lot if you put a lot into them. They can just be a test you pay for if not. But sometimes you need that to get in the door. But I don't know, any other CISOs in the room have any other thoughts on masters versus certifications? Yeah. There's a lot of opinions. I just gave mine. You just gave yours. So you can probably hear a lot of those. But the reason I say yes is because I think all of it can be good if you use it accretive to you getting the position. But I don't think there's any surefire. If I get this, then I got the job type thing. So, yeah.
Like it.
Yeah. By industry, by type. Yeah, it's great. Other questions? Weird.
Yeah. So that's what about all the what about the app connector? You need to pick which part of that from other material. So what that better for that position or bro that history the trade where over on that happened.
So it's such a good question. And it is a gaping hole in this presentation, which really wasn't focused on that. But thank you for asking a question. So the question was, for those that couldn't hear, is what is the actual path? Like if I'm trying to do a step-by-step to get there, what are the roles I need to? And unfortunately, because this is a newer role, there really is not any one single path. Maybe it will start to collate after a while. Like paths to other C-level jobs, there really is much more of a path. In security, there's not. I think the important thing, though, is you are going to have to get more experience leading. And for most of the CISOs I know, they became an expert in one field, began to lead that one, then got the opportunity, whether it was joining another company or in their own company, to lead more than one team. Then they went to another company, maybe as a director over all of it, and then eventually got the CISO role, either in that company or by jumping to another. But the idea is to look to get that first leadership role, usually a manager, maybe associate manager, and then start increasing your leadership. And how do you do that? Is you're successful at each level of leadership. And then you look for your next role. And sometimes it might be outside, but a lot of places try to develop from within. So I know a lot of the folks at Walmart security team, they're very good at developing their folks within. And their CISO, I mean, he basically has done his whole career there at Walmart. So it kind of depends on the organization. Was that a good answer? My CISO is yes, no, yes, yeah. I'm getting nods. Okay, so I'm turning this into a panel for you guys. Yeah.
It seemed to me the strategy that our organization that doesn't have the CIO, the chief risk officer, they'll indexing the organization to
Yeah, that's a really tough one. Convincing the organization they need something that they don't have and don't want to pay for. It's really hard. And to me, I think you really have to, if that was a presentation I was going to make, I think you really have to show them why it's important and really emphasize that. And so I think you really have to understand, why does this organization need one? Because it may not be appropriate for the organization at the time. They may just need a director, and that's enough. And especially if you have a supportive CIO or supportive CEO and they're making the right decisions and you're approving the program, maybe it isn't needed. A lot of times it's needed for the organization to look legitimate to the outside world. So sometimes it really is that face of, we need a face of security in the organization that has the high title, the higher level title, so that people will take us seriously. So a lot of companies think about doing this just before they IPO, so that I have this security role. So I think it would, were I to do that in an organization, I would interview these others and say, why don't we have one? What would you see as the reason? And then I would build an argument on that and say, this is why I think we should give the title to this person and have them report in this structure and do these things. So it really is context specific in my mind. And not every organization necessarily needs one, just like not every organization needs a CIO. They don't all need COOs. So I think it's trying to figure out what the right time for the organization is and what is the why behind it. It's not just to have it, it's to have it for a reason. And typically it's either to elevate the level of maturity of security within the organization, and also to show that level of maturity outside. Just like what Citicorp was doing when they created the role in the first instance. Does that make sense? My opinion on it. Thank you. Elias.
Is there a primary metric or maybe a key metric that you could ask for more than any other? For me to, for example, a TT.
Oh, that I get asked for?
Yeah.
Well, the question I get asked the most is, are we secure? Which is, I don't know, yes, no, yeah, how long do you have? Exactly. I would say the most common type of metric I get asked is some version of ROI. So some version of, are we getting what we should be getting out of what we're spending? So be it headcount spending, tool spending, is this actually making us more secure or not? That is the question. That is the type of question I get asked more than any other. If it's a specific question, it's usually incidents. They always want to know, have we had any incidents? Have we been breached? That type of thing. So that's really, really good. And nothing actualizes risk more for decision makers than telling them about an actual breach or attempted breach that was stopped or was just caught in its tracks. That is the best thing. But yeah, they always want to know, like, hey, we have 7 people on our GRC team. Why? What are they doing? What's the ROI? And that is one of the things as security leaders that we need to do. I was talking around this a lot in the presentation about understanding the business. We have to go into those rooms and be able to talk to the business. And one of the things we need to be able to do is show the economic, the dollars and cents value of everything that we do and be able to prove it. We are not mature in this space. And until we mature, we will always be treated like, pardon the phrase, redhead stepchild, right? Like the second, third class citizen, until we are able to do that maturely. Sales can do it. Marketing can do it. We need to be able to do it. And so that's the most common question I get asked, because we don't bring it. I mean, I try to do that, but it's still maturing, in my program too. Trust me, a lot of things I was saying today are pointing the finger at me, not just other people. So I can improve as well.
CISO.
Like personally had to deal with? Because of my experience responding to hundreds, if not over 1,000 different breaches of various kinds, especially when I was law enforcement, when I see a vulnerability, a problem, my mind immediately goes to how bad could that be? And it has taken me a long time to not walk into a room and say, we need to do all the security things, and to temper that with the business, which is probably why I hit that point so many times in my presentation. It's because that was the hardest for me. Not understanding a business and not understanding the concept of that we're here to do business or execute our organization's mission, but being able to go in and say, maybe we don't need to do that today, even though I think we should, even though it would be the right thing to do, but it doesn't make sense with where we are as an organization and the budget that we have and everything else that's happening. That is the hardest thing for me to do. But I put my big boy pants, big girl pants on, and I go in and I make those decisions. When I go in there and the other leaders say, we can do A, B, or C, which one? And I have to choose one. It's so hard for me to be like, yes, this is what we should do, because I want to do all the things. So that's been the hardest for me. Does that make sense? A good answer? Sound okay? Okay. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Yeah. That is a great question. Now, I do hope the world is going to turn and we won't hold people accountable like this. And I think it already is with the judges. I don't know if you read a 107-page judgment that the judge made dismissing 7 of the charges. It's really a good read because basically it says, SEC, you have no idea what you're doing. And it's awesome. So that's good. That's good. The winds are blowing in the right direction. But how do I protect myself? Well, one, personally, I got on the D&O insurance. So I made sure that I'm covered there. And then doing that, I also went and looked at every single piece of literature that we officially publish to make sure that all of the security claims we make are things that I can stand behind, right? And then I went and talked to the sales organization and got assurances for them that they're not promising too much, right? And then I actually went and talked to the rest of the C-suite, CEO, CFO, chief legal, all of these people, one-on-one, and talked to them about what I was concerned about, and really had a one-on-one conversation with them. I understand that the CISO role might be quote unquote scapegoated for a security failure. I get that I accept that. Just like a CEO accepts if they have multiple quarters of loss, they might get fired by the board. I accept that. But I don't want to be held personally liable in those ways and blamed in those ways. So having those personal relationships, now they may choose to stab me in the back, but I feel confident looking them in the eye and saying, this is what I'm trying to do. I expressly talked about the fear. I don't want to get stabbed in the back. What do I need to do for you to make sure you're comfortable with what I'm doing and you feel like I'm behaving ethically and I stand behind all the statements we've made? What else can I do for you? And that's what I've tried to do. That's the due diligence that I've done. But a big task was to go through every single document, make sure we're not stating anything anywhere that I've not something I can stand behind morally, ethically, and actually think we're doing it. Does that make sense? All right. One more. Yes.
So outside of military or how do you go about back? We should go back.
It's a really great question. So for ability to talk business, I mean, there's a lot of material out there. You can find websites that are like MBA and books, and you can just read through a bunch of books. There's books on communication. So you can educate yourself that way really well. And then after that, it's practice. So I know some people who aren't great at public speaking or, even standing in front of a C-suite terrifies them, and they join like Toastmasters or other organizations like that, where they can go get practical skills on how to communicate, how to tell stories, and get better at it, and then practice. But I really think it's taking the edge. And then, there's tons of stuff online, videos and stuff. Watch those, learn from the best on how to communicate, and then go practice it. It's as simple as that. In fact, even if you do go get education, I'd tell you to do that, because nothing makes you better than practice, and getting good feedback, which I'm sure I will get from a number of you after this presentation. So thank you for that. Anyway, it's been my pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Johnson.